And so you're dealing with higher level executives, board members, things like that. It seems like from your intro. How are you convincing them, right? These hard chargers. Hey guys, we gotta stop and actually think through our emotions here.
Yeah, it doesn't always work. Yeah.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into episode 60 of the Driven Crowd Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. My guest today is the founder of HolyWork, LeFevre. Luke has worked for over 20 years in business, with the last 10 being in leadership and the last 5 being in C-suite and board-level leadership. He began on the creative side of things and through writing and design, learned how to make complicated ideas simple. Luke helped build Ramsey Solutions into a world-class brand, culture, and company, and he now helps CEOs, executive, creative leaders, and small business owners do the same for their companies and churches. Luke, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you, too.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on, and a pleasure to meet you as well. We were talking a little bit about the show before we started here, and give us a little background into how you came up professionally.
Yeah. Well, it was a mess. How about that? It was not like I didn't have this perfect vision of here's what I'm going to do one day. It was just kind of following little polls here and there. And I started out as a designer at a little agency outside of Chicago. And I went to school for what's called visual communication. And that's what I got my degree in. But that wasn't because, one day I'm going to be a designer. It was basically, well, I'm kind of good at drawing. So how do I make money? How do I make money doing that? You know? And it was like 2001. So it was either learn how to draw Aladdin or graphic design.
Exactly.
I don't know what the differences were. So, but I got that first job out of school, and I'm, making brochures, putting logos on pens, T-shirts, all these things. And I just really hated it. I did not like it. I had such a bad attitude about it. And just kind of that, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. And, you're 22. No one's doing what they're supposed to be doing at 22, 23 years old.
You don't even know what you're supposed to be doing at 22 years old.
Exactly. And I wish somebody would have just been like, Luke, calm down. But I just had this angsty attitude all the time. And I don't think the places I worked for would have known that, but man, when I got home and talked to my wife, I was a belly aching mess. And about
hold on. So you're 22 and you're married and coming home.
I got married pretty young. Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah. So the wife is like, whoa, hold on, this isn't what I signed up for.
Exactly. Yeah, we got. Let's see. I was actually 21 when we got married, and I just had a month to go before I turned 22. And we were high school sweethearts, college sweethearts, and it's part of the story of this whole thing too. And anyway, so about 2006, I had grown up. I had grown up a Christian and went to a little Christian school, a little Christian college, but it wasn't real to me. I just was sort of around it, so I professed to believe these things. But I'm looking at my life from like 2001 to 2005, and I just wasn't a content person. It was like all these things I read was like Jesus was here to bring life and life more abundantly. And I'm like, well, I'm not happy. I'm not content. This thing, is it all just BS? Is this even true?
Right.
And in 2006, we were going to this church, and I was kind of going through the motions. And really, I was a mess. It looked great on the outside, but internally, I was just a mess. And this pastor came to the church I was going to in 2006, and I was honestly ready to be like, I'm going to give up on this whole thing, this whole God thing. And just at the end of his talk, though, he goes, I dare you to ask God to rock your world. And I just was like, well, it wasn't like lightning strikes or anything, but I was more like, well, that I can do. And if he's real, maybe he'll do something, you know? And so it's kind of a dangerous thing to do. But I went and I wrote this note in a new Bible. I bought a new Bible to add to the stack because this one was going to work. And so I wrote this note in the front that just said, God, I dare you to rock my world. I look forward to seeing what happens. And it, like I said, it wasn't lightning strikes, but over the course of the next year, I suppose, I had these little nudges. One of them, I mean, this is all on how I got to where I got. I was sitting there making one of those sprinkler brochures that I loathed. And I was also at this time in a band, which is a whole nother story. But at lunch on this one day, I had to make a band poster. And so all morning I'm working on this sprinkler brochure just with my bad attitude. Sprinklers suck. And then I get to noon and I jump up and I'm like, oh, I get to make my band poster. And so I knew this building I wanted to take a picture of, and I was going to take the picture and I was going to tilt it and make it look really cool on the poster. And I go take the picture. I get back to my office, sit down, make this awesome poster over the course of the next lunch hour. 12:45, still working on it. 12:50. Oh man, the guys in the band are going to love this, you know, blah, blah, blah. 12:55. 12:59, I'm excited. I finish the poster, I set it down, and I get back to my sprinkler brochure. I'm like, ugh.
Energy just drains from your
Stupid
being.
Sprinkler brochure. Yeah. And I just felt this little nudge, and it wasn't like a voice in my head or anything, but it was just this little nudge that was like, hey, what if you put as much energy into this sprinkler brochure as you did your band poster? Like, what if you tried? You know, what if you went after it and didn't just try to be done, you tried to be good? And so I was like, okay, what would really help these contractors trying to sell this sprinkler, you know? And so I did. I was like, all right, well, they'd probably like it to be like this, and they'd probably like it to be like this. And so I tried to make the coolest sprinkler brochure I could. And turns out the client liked it. And I was like, huh, they liked it. And I actually didn't hate making it. Imagine. And so over the course of the next, you know, I then got my salon bowl or salon chair brochure, and I was like, all right, what would really help them? What would be really cool here? And so I tried to make a really great salon chair brochure, and just I kept doing that, and I started not to hate the work. I started to kind of think about, all right, what could we create this week, you know? And I really think that what I learned there was you can't go to the next thing until you embrace the thing is right in front of you. And that was what I feel like God was teaching me there. And then as I did that, my portfolio got better. I matured. I had better communication. And at the same time, another little nudge was, hey, you should figure out your money a little better. It was kind of a mess too. Me and my wife, we had a bunch of credit card debt, school loans, car loans, all the things.
Right.
And so I started Googling investing and, okay, what do I do? I wasn't even thinking about getting out of debt at that point. But that's how I came across Dave Ramsey in 2008. It was about that time, 2007. And I started listening to his show, and I just got hooked because I was like, I knew there was a better way to handle money. And I felt like an idiot getting that car loan and all these things. And so I was starting to do really well at work. We're starting to get our money together. Mandy and I are working together a little bit better. And all of a sudden, sitting there listening to the Dave Ramsey show while doing this work, and somebody calls in and says that they need a job. And Dave, for some reason on that day goes, well, what do you do? And the guy goes, no, I'm an engineer. And Dave goes, well, we don't need engineers around here. We need some graphic designers. And I was like, really? For what? You know, I thought it was a tiny little company and a book and nothing big. But so I applied, and I came down to Nashville and started as a senior designer for him in 2008. And I mean, that's just the beginning of the story of how we got where I got. But I just kept messing with things over the last 15 years, over the 14 years that I was there, and slowly just kept getting involved in the live events and the apps and the advertising and the website and all these things, and eventually worked my way up to lead the whole creative team. We had 150 people there on the creative team alone.
Oh,
1,000
wow.
people at the company. Yeah. And so it's video people, writers, project managers, and amazing group of people. I loved being at Ramsey. It was just such a great place. I learned so much. And towards the end of my time there, I just started to have this other kind of pull that was, I would see all these creatives and honestly business owners and different people I worked with. I was over the culture and communication committee there too. And I just started to see a lot of people who felt a pull to speak up in meetings even, or create something in their life, but then they would pull back and they wouldn't do it and they would stay stuck. And I started to talk to them about that and start to talk about a habit that I had built, journaling and writing. And I can tell you that whole story too. But when people unlock their filter in their brain and they start journaling what they're actually thinking and feeling, it unlocks some things. And I liked to walk people through that process. And so helping people get unlocked and unclogged to actually follow where God is pulling them is what I decided to leave Ramsey to go pursue and build my own business on. And now I coach creatives and individuals, and now I coach some small businesses and companies as well on unlocking themselves so they can accomplish what I feel like God has put it on their hearts to accomplish.
Oh, wow, man. So we're definitely going to come back to the journaling thing. That's something that we haven't overly explored here on this show. But I want to go back to your prayer and then kind of the mindset shift there. Yeah. So a couple of years ago, a friend, a good buddy of mine, Marcus Brock, and I decided, okay, so this year, we're going to pray for patience. We're going to pray for more patience this year. And I think I switched. Yeah, I think I switched to joy by February because I was getting way too many opportunities to learn patience. So I had to switch. So yes, be careful and think through exactly what you're praying for. But on that mindset shift, you had that kind of, I'll call it an epiphany, like, oh, well, what if I started doing this? Yeah. How many people do you talk to in your coaching practice or just, helping people, mentoring people along the way who are always looking for that next thing instead of embracing what's right there in front of them to learn and grow?
Oh, it's so many.
I know that was me for sure.
Yeah, it's all of us. It's me right now. It's all of us always. But because we want the next thing before we've learned what it's going to take to be able to handle the next thing. When I've done a little research on patience, and I came across the apple seed. I mean, this might be cheesy as heck, but it's like an apple seed takes I think it's once that seed germinates, it takes 8 to 10 years before the tree can even hold one apple. And that's us. So we have these ideas, we got these things that are building and germinating, for lack of a word, inside of us. And we're like, well, I want it now. Let's go. You're not even strong enough to hold one apple yet. So embrace the thing that's in front of you. I usually say, rock the thing that's in front of you, and then we'll talk about what's next.
And so, how do you internally balance that, right? Because, somebody who wants that next thing, they're driven, they have this vision for themselves. Maybe they've thought that far through or not. But how do you know when you are rocking it and it's time for that next step?
I think it comes in two ways. The first one is the opportunities will come to you once you finally let go of striving for that next thing. There's that sports analogy of striving. We're going to strive to win this championship, and like working hard is a good thing. But the difference between a desperate striving and a working hard for a championship or whatever. When you're desperately striving for something, like, oh, I got to do it no matter what, and it's like becoming this weird desperation, it's not going to come. When you let go finally, and this doesn't mean you're not working hard. So I'll hit another point here in a second.
Yeah.
When you finally let go of that desperate striving and you embrace the thing that's in front of you and you do it to the absolute best you can do, eventually the next thing will come appropriately and it'll open up as it should, versus this frantic, I got to do this and I got to do this and I'm going to take a bad deal, or I'm going to jump into this new thing because I've got this goal and I need to hit X million dollars and we got to do this thing. Once you let go of that and embrace the thing and do the best you can in front of you, then the other opportunities will naturally come. The next thing will open up.
And I think football coaches, I've heard recently several of them kind of focus in on the same or a very similar topic, which is, look, yeah, we want to win the Super Bowl. Of course, that's our ultimate goal. But our focus is on practice today. Yeah. We're going to block, we're going to tackle, we're going to be able to execute these plays flawlessly. And if we do that and, you know, we have some things go our way, then eventually we're going to get to that finish line. And I think business is the same way, right? It's so easy to sit there and focus on that horizon and know that, all right, I got to do all of these different things, but then you're constantly focused on the future instead of right now. What do we got to do today? What do we have to accomplish today?
Yeah. One of the best pieces of advice I got was from the guy who runs Strategic Coach. I read his book called The Gap and the Gain.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's great. Like he talks about, we're always out there looking at the horizon, but the horizon's always moving. We literally never catch it.
Yeah.
So the only way to measure your progress is to look backwards and see how far you've come. And that speaks to what you're saying. And if we're always like, we don't practice the blocking, if we don't practice the tackling, when we get out in the actual game, we're going to get our face punches, and the Super Bowl will not be even a possibility.
Absolutely. All right. So talk to us about journaling. You know, we've heard, and there's all of these social media articles and influencers who talk about, oh, journaling's so great. And I'm going to be completely transparent here.
Please.
I've tried like 20 different times, and I'll make it a day or two, and it's more of just like a task to be completed than something that is actually helpful to me. So clearly I'm doing something wrong, because I'm the same way with meditation. I am desperately trying to find, you know, just even 5 minutes to really sit there and quiet my brain, which is never quiet.
Really hard.
Yeah, exactly. So walk me through kind of the benefits of journaling and how to get started doing that.
Yeah. Well, my story with journaling wasn't I'm going to improve my productivity. It happened to me in 2010. So I told you my wife and I got married real young, and I was kind of a mess mentally. And when I prayed that prayer, God, please rock my world, he started to make some changes, and my mindset changed. And then we came down here to Tennessee, and I started working for Ramsey. And in about 2010, we moved away from everybody we knew in Illinois. We moved down to Tennessee, just me and my wife, and we had one child at the time, and she was pregnant with our second. And about 6 months into us being down here, I thought, man, I moved my family across the country. I'm working for a great place. And I started to feel this discontentment again, that same thing. And I was like, what is wrong? Like, what else do I need to change in my life? And this discontentment just kept coming in. And I started to really think, I got to make a change. Like, what is going on? Maybe I'll just never be happy. And I had a bunch of addictions at the time. I was just a mess. And I started to think, what is the only thing that has been constant in my life throughout this whole period? And you would think that I would start looking back at myself, but I actually started looking at my wife, Mandy. She's the problem. We got married too young. I married the wrong person. You know, my brain started just playing all these thoughts out, and I started to believe them. And I was out running one day in 2010, prepping for the 2010 marathon, and I just started to come to the realization that I can't live like this anymore, with this angst all the time and this discontentment, and it's Mandy's fault, and I think I've got to get a divorce. Oof. And we had 2 kids, and my brain was just going and going and going. And again, even though I had prayed that prayer, and I know we're talking a lot about God and religion and stuff here, but even though I'd prayed that prayer, I wasn't actively daily sort of seeking or trying to learn. And so I went out for this run. I'm thinking about a divorce. Like, what would happen? Would she move away? What would happen with my job? Like, I was really playing this out, and I started crying, and I'm full of emotion. And this thought hit me out of nowhere, and it was just, be still and know that I'm God. Like it kind of smacked me in the face. And I finished the run. I got home and I was like, what was that? It just was out of nowhere. I didn't hear a voice. Again, I'm not trying to be weird or anything. It was just like this massive something just smacked me in the face. And I got home and I was like, God, was you? Is this what people talk about when they hear from God or something like that? And I pondered that. I was like, geez, if that was real, then maybe some of these things I have heard are true. And I remembered thinking about the verse that says the truth will set you free. Mm-hmm. So I thought to myself, and I had this little nudge to write Mandy a letter and tell her the truth. If I was willing to risk getting a divorce, why wouldn't I risk telling the truth to try to make the thing better? And so I got out a note, I got out my computer and I started typing, and I just wrote her this long letter where I just told the actual truth of what I was thinking and feeling, not what anybody else wanted to hear, not what was appropriate, not what was safe. I told her the truth about tons of stuff from my past that I hadn't told anybody. I told her about the doubts I was having. I told her about the addictions, everything. And as I was writing, I'm like, but I think my thinking is distorted here. And I wrote at the end, I'm willing to fight for this if you are. And so she got home that night and I read it to her, and I thought we were going to be in big trouble, but actually she said, okay, I'm in to fight for this too. Like, I told her the truth of what I was thinking and feeling, the honest, actual truth. And it made our relationship better. And I thought it was going to make it worse.
Wow.
And so over time, the next couple of weeks, we start communicating, we start talking, we start telling each other what's really going on in our hearts and our minds. And I had this thought, I was like, geez, if my life got better, if I told my wife the truth, I wonder if I started telling God the truth. And so I just said, I'm going to get out a journal. I'm going to read one chapter of this Bible, and I'm going to write down what I actually think about it and what's going on in my mind. And that was 2010. And I just started honestly putting down on paper what I was actually thinking and feeling. And if something didn't make sense to me, or I was angry, or if I was upset, I wrote it all out. And I did that I did it a few times a week there in 2010, but then I started being really consistent with it and I did it from 2010 to 2011, 12, all the way to 2015 before I had told anybody any of that story. It's 5 years, bunch of journals filled. And during that 5 years, I was at Ramsey. I had so much favor. The ideas I had I would have that time in the morning where I was writing out what I was actually thinking and feeling. And then when something would come up during the day, I had an idea. I was ready because I had thought things through, because I had written things down. I had let them go to God. And so in 2015, I was in a leadership position at that point. I led a small team of the creatives, and people would come to me with problems, and I'd just be like, hey, here's what I want you to do. Just go home tomorrow morning, get up, and I just want you to write 2 pages. Just don't stop writing. Write out what's going on. Don't filter. Don't worry about curse words. Don't worry about spelling. Don't worry about anything. Just write the truth of what you're actually thinking and feeling. And they'd be like, okay. The next day they'd come back and they'd be like, Luke, I did that thing you said. I just wrote it all out. I feel so much better. And other people would be like, hey, what is that thing you were talking about? And so I would teach them how to write without a filter, without just unclog what's all this stuff. I call it the epidermis level thinking. It's the surface level stuff that just clogs up the truth of what we're thinking and feeling. And so over time, I just started teaching that more. And there's this whole process you go through to get through the epidermis level stuff down to the heart of what the heart is really feeling, down to the muscle, into the muscle, and then even traumatic journaling, where I call it you break the bones of the past. And that's some traumatic journaling, and then work through what you want for the future. And so my journaling practice started out of desperation. It wasn't like, well, I'm going to do this because Instagram says it's a cool productivity hack or something. This was, if I don't do this, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
There's too much going on in my brain. And I think that's true for so many people. You said it earlier. People are running so fast and climbing their ladder so fast. They get to the top and they realize that, I don't know who said this, but they realize that ladder is leaning up on the wrong building, or they've run this race and they're like, I don't even know where I was going. And I have learned that journaling slows you down, helps you clear out what's going on in your brain to figure out where you actually want to go and ultimately where God is pulling you.
And so I don't want to sit here and go through your entire journaling program, but I do have some specific questions.
For sure.
So, I am awful about correcting as I go and filtering, and whatever I'm writing, whether it's an email or whether it's a Word doc, or even if I'm writing something creative, like for marketing or whatnot, I'll write a few sentences and I'll go back and I'll edit. And I think that's just because thinking is hard and editing is easier. Right.
Yeah.
And so how do you teach somebody to sit down and like, where do you start? And then how do you tell them, or how do they turn off that part of their brain that wants to just stop and go back and cross out and fix spelling and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, if it was you and me sitting here, I'd have you get out a journal, not a computer, get a pen and a journal. If you don't have a journal, get a piece of paper, use your yellow pad. And I'd have you put on a timer. We'd put on a timer and I would say, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write for 1 minute. Do not stop writing. Do not lift your pen. Do not worry about spelling or grammar. And I want you to write for 1 minute. Solid. Don't stop.
But where do I start? What do I write about?
Exactly. I just want you to start. And so for that first minute, people, I don't answer any of their questions. So and I know they have all those questions. So they write for a minute. I'd have you write for a minute. And then at the end, I'd be like, how'd it go? And some people would be like, well, I don't know. I didn't know what to write and blah, blah, blah. So then I'll ask them, what did they write? Some people make a bullet list. They're like, well, I started making bullet points. Some people actually write the questions that you just asked me, like, well, I don't even know where to start. And I think that is the beginning of the magic. If you can write down what your brain is actually doing and start to acknowledge that, that's the beginning. So for the second minute, I say, all right, here's what we're going to do. This is all just warm up. Here's what we're going to do. I want you to take that same pen and that same piece of paper, and I want you to write for 2 minutes. This time, when thoughts come up, like I don't know what to write, or I don't know what I'm doing, or any of those kind of things, I want you to write those down. Any thought that comes up, I just want you to write it down. Acknowledge it, write it down. So then we go for 2 minutes. And afterwards, they're like, oh, that was a little easier, because you're not worried about if you're doing it right or wrong, because there is no right or wrong. Journaling isn't about accomplishing things. It's about acknowledging things. Once you acknowledge the things, then they start to have a place to go, because journaling is honestly just like a budget for your brain. Those ping pong bingo ball circles that they spin to let the bingo balls out?
Yeah.
Like when you're spinning that thing, that's what your brain is like. There's ping pong balls going everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. But when you're journaling, it's like, hey, that one comes out here, that one comes out here, that one comes out here. And it starts to give all those thoughts a place to go. So then after that 2 minute one, they're like, okay, that still sucked. I don't like it. But what we do is we start to talk about your internal editor now. So you now wrote for a minute, you can do it. You wrote for 2 minutes and you started to write down what you were actually thinking, like, oh, geez, I can smell Wendy's. There's bacon. My hair looks bad. Whatever that surface level stuff is, you start to get through. But we start to talk about the editor. In our brains, we have an internal editor, an internal critic, born from the voices of our parents, our teachers, all of those people. That's kind of locked in. And so what we need to do is start to recognize that editor and either ask it to shut up or write down what it says. So sometimes you'll be writing and you'll get the thought of like, I'm an idiot, or this is so stupid, or whatever. Write it down and just start getting those things out. Julie Cameron calls those editor blurts. She calls those blurts. She's a creative writing coach that helps people get unblocked. And so after we talk about ignoring or writing down what the editor is saying, we do a little teaching there. We get to the actual workout of this thing. And so what I have people do after the 1 minute, the 2 minute, and speaking about the editor is I have them put on a timer and they write nonstop. Don't lift your pen. Don't worry about spelling. Do not filter for 10 minutes solid. And you do that for 10 minutes. And inevitably, about 5 or 6 minutes in, you have written about all the stupid crap that your brain is worried about.
Yeah.
You know, I got to get the oil changed. I got to figure out dinner for tonight. I got to get gas. Somebody's upset at me. You know, all this kind of stuff. And you get through all of that. And essentially your brain's like, okay, cool. Now we can downshift. Man, am I not connecting with my wife like I should? Man, is my kid okay? What do I want with my life? Do I drink too much? Like, you get to the deeper stuff, and usually there's a few people in these courses or when I'm doing this that about 5 or 6 minutes in, you'll start to hear some sniffles because people are through all the BS. And you want to get to the muscle layer, which is next. So the skin layer is all that epidermis level stuff that then you get to the muscle layer, and we start really hearing what's going on in your heart and the real stuff that matters to you. And so for that second half of the 5 minutes, usually it's some more important things that you start to write about. And so that 10-minute one is a really important one. And then in the courses, we do that every time. You do that 10-minute journaling thing every time, basically to just get through all the crap. So then when you ask some real questions like, hey, where did that original voice of criticism come from? You can now use that same experience of writing without a filter to write about that thing, to start to look at beliefs, to start look at fears that are holding you back. So that's how I would have you start.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. Thank you for walking us through that. Yeah. And there's something to writing stuff down, right?
Oh yeah.
My brain is the bingo machine, the bingo ball, and it's amazing. Every time I find myself really stressed out about something or feeling overwhelmed, one of my initial inclinations is to make a list. Yeah. Right. And that's essentially kind of, you know, a journaling type activity. And what I'm doing is I'm showing my mind that, hey, it's not that bad, because the list is never, the list never matches the feelings.
Right. Feelings are huge.
Yeah. Feelings are huge. And so as soon as you can almost get back to the logic side of your brain and start making that list and getting those things out of your head and onto paper, all of a sudden, for me anyway, that anxiety or that worry or whatever starts to bleed away.
Yeah,
and then
it really does.
It opens up my capacity to start solving the problems that are on that list or doing those things in some kind of an order.
Yes. I think that's wonderful. That is what journaling does. Now, what happens is that people never actually go acknowledge any of those feelings or emotions. Somebody like you is a hard driver who will make that list, knock out those 20 things, and then move on to the next 20 things, and then the next 30 things, and never slow down to be like, wait, was that sadness? Oh, screw that. Keep going.
Hey, we're on a roll, man. We got momentum.
We're going. And so part of what I do in these sessions is if you look back at another scriptural thing, and some of your listeners, I'm sure, aren't believers and are rolling their eyes at all these things. But Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I like to look at life as heart, soul, mind, and strength. We need all four. If you are constantly working in your mind and strength and never acknowledging the heart and soul, your soul will slowly dry up and die. If you only work in your heart and soul and you never use your mind and strength to do anything, you might have a really you might never actually do anything. You might not have a job. You might not. You'll just, I don't know if you'll be homeless or whatever if you only work there. The key, Jesus said, heart, soul, mind, and strength. And so what I'd like to look at in these practices is, okay, where do you naturally go? Do you go heart and soul? or heart only, or soul only, or mind only, or strength only. So, for example, the strength would be when a problem comes to you, are you the one who's like, all right, we're going to punch this in the face and we're going to break down this brick wall and we're going to figure out how to solve this thing no matter what, every time? Or do you go to the mind and you're like, okay, what's the policy? What's the rule? What's the strategy we need to do to solve this problem? Or if a problem comes to you and you go to the heart, are you like, wow, this is really going to affect the team and we probably shouldn't move forward because so-and-so is going to not like this? Or are you soul and you go straight to, ooh, this is really going to be a great story someday. And it's like more about vision. I like to figure out where people naturally go at the beginning of these sessions. And naturally, and this is not everyone, I would say that 70% of the 75% of people naturally go to mind and strength mostly. They're like, they've learned, oh, we have to accomplish something. We got to hit the goals. We got to do the thing. So then I'll have people go back and look at themselves. We'll pull out pictures of yourself from 8 to 12 years old. And we'll look at a bunch of pictures of yourself and be like, tell me about that kid. Who was that kid? What was going on? And we'll learn about that child. And after spending some time in the mentality of that child, we'll then go, all right, let's look at that heart, soul, mind, strength again and see where were you as that kid? A lot of times there's a whole lot more heart and soul as the kid. And then as adults, we grow up and realize, well, we got to perform. We got to sit up. We got to do the thing. We got to do the thing. And we slowly start squashing down the heart and soul until all that's left is mind and strength. And we don't realize we're leaving our own soul as a body. We're leaving other people a trail of bodies. And the key is to mix those four things together. And so that's some of the other stuff we do in the journaling exercises as well.
And so you're dealing with higher level executives, board members, things like that. It seems like from your intro, how are you convincing them, right? These hard chargers, hey guys, we gotta stop and actually think through our emotions here.
Yeah, it doesn't always work. Yeah. And I do a wide variety. So it's not all executives, and it's some small businesses, and it's creatives too. The executives are the ones that hate this the most. Mm-hmm.
They're busy. They got stuff to do. They don't have time to think about stuff like that. Exactly.
So how do I convince them? We go through these exercises, and then over time, if they continue to do the practices of journaling and get that stuff out, they will realize how I am more connected to my family. I am more connected to what it is I actually want. My team members have said that I've changed. It's things like that. I sat with one small business CEO. This was 6 months ago. And she goes, so what's your mission in life? What's your mission in life? And I said this on her show. I said, I want people to slow down. Like if that was my mission, I want people to slow down.
Did she end the show right there?
What's that?
Did she end the show right there?
Yeah. She didn't say it, but later we're talking and she goes, when you said that, I was like, slow down. That either means that you can't keep up with me or I'm doing something wrong. And I don't like either of those. And so, but what happened is this lady was almost to the point of burnout.
Yeah.
She was nobody knew, but she was like thinking about quitting the role of CEO of this job. She needed to take a giant break to reset her brain, reset her vision. She had no vision for the future. She was exhausted. She couldn't see past the day-to-day weeds of everything she was working on to see what the vision of the future could be. And she was about ready to quit. And so we went through a process about 10 weeks where she actually, I didn't suggest this, but she came back and she goes, I'm taking a sabbatical. And so she took a sabbatical and we walked through this process and it slowed her down. And she found a clear vision for what she wants for the future of the company. She didn't know that was what's going to happen, but she had to reset because she was she was mentally and physically done because she was all heart, she was all mind and strength for so long that slowly she forgot what the heck she was even doing any of it for. And that's the key for executives. We're so hard driving.
Yeah.
I'll get up, I'll make this podcast, I'll do this thing, I'll blah, blah, blah. It's like my wife and kids are out there now. I'll go to the next thing when I get off this. And if I'm not careful, I will just keep going until tomorrow morning. And I will realize, oh, my wife, she needed me to just go for a walk with her today.
Yeah.
And I don't want to leave a trail of bodies. I want to leave purpose. I want to leave mission. I want to leave connection. And over time, executives will realize, if they're smart, that this is an investment just like into their 401ks, just like they work out their bodies. In order to work out your body, you've got to work it harder and faster to get in shape. But your brain, you have to slow it down and focus it to really get in shape. Otherwise, you're just running and you're doing tasks, which are necessary, but you have to slow down.
Man, well, Luke, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. I'd love to talk for another hour here, but we are about out of time.
Me too.
So I'm going to leave you with one final question here, and that is, give me your top 3 books. Fiction, nonfiction.
The one I was just thinking about as we were talking about these executives, I'll pull it out. It's right here. Yeah, the first one, as far as the book, top 3 favorite books, is one of them is called I Don't Want to Talk About It. It's Overcoming the Secret Legacy of Male Depression. I mean, it's like,
nice.
It sounds horrible, but I had to set this book down because it was so impactful. And I was just bawling as he was telling these stories of accomplished men who had ruined their families because they didn't stop.
Yeah.
And I love the mix of both. The second one is Wild at Heart by John Eldredge.
Yeah, I've read
just
that one.
An amazing book that hit me square in the face one time. And my top favorite book of all time is The War of Art by a guy named Stephen Pressfield. Whenever I'm feeling particularly stuck, I just go read a little bit of that book, and it wakes me up every time. Those would be my top 3.
You are the second one to mention The War of Art. I think Tony Albrecht was our first guest to mention that. And that's, I have not read that one. Oh, you know Tony?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Well, hey, once again, Luke, thank you so much. Very, very interesting. Really appreciate your insight. And thank you to everyone tuning in for this episode of the Driven Crowd Podcast. We'll see you next time.